Good afternoon. Badane Jai Shri Krishna. Great to be here today. Thank you to Satish Bhai, Vijay Bhai for inviting me to speak on this biofuels for Bharat. I would like to start by acknowledging the legacy that I have received, especially in the context of the last discussion, from my father and grandfather, as they thought of building a stronger and more self-reliant Bharat. Our company was founded in 1939 by my grandfather, Padma Bhushan Karamshi Bhai Jethabhai Somaiya, as the Godavari sugar mills, because it was on the banks of the river Godavari. As a young boy, we used to do prarthana every day, and one of the shloks we used to say every morning, and we still do, was Samudra Vasane Devi Parvatastana Mandale Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam Padasparsham Kshamasvame. Reflecting that the entire planet is the goddess, and for stepping on you every morning, please forgive me. Padasparsham Kshamasvame. In many ways, I think the philosophy of our company is to have that lighter footprint. So it's not only the shlok you say in the prarthana, but also what you need to try to do. And in many ways, I have thought that biofuels for Bharat is also a way in which we can move to that lighter footprint. It's very important that we should think of a circular economy in terms of how we get the carbon and then how we convert that carbon to our need for food, our need for fuel, our need for chemicals, and our need for materials. There is a planetary imperative, and there is also an imperative for the country itself. I think when we look at the planetary imperative, it is clear. Geopolitics is making more and more clear that we have to be more self-reliant. And climate change has been there for some time, in which we are seeing that the fossil way of doing things, we have to find alternatives to that. And an Indian way of looking at things. In India also, climate change does not know boundaries. So if there's climate change in one part of the planet, it will affect the other side. The geopolitics of the world influences us to see energy security. We must look at our own energy security. And finally, India has small farmers. And so when we have small farmers, we have to see that their income security should also be looked at. So these are the imperatives that come together: geopolitics and climate change, which is common to the whole world, and farmer income security, since more than half of our population today is reliant still on the farm. It is important that their income security also has a basis. Today, our fossil fuels, if I just looked at last year, 85% of the world's consumption of energy comes from oil, gas, and coal. Still, we talk about a path to a lower carbon future, but that path remains at an 85% use. If we look at it, other than parts of Brazil and maybe Scandinavia, much of the world continues to be addicted on a fossil consumption which is not sustainable in the context of climate change. If I look at India, India's per capita consumption of energy is 7,000 kilowatt hours per capita. And if I look at Norway, it is 100,000 kilowatt hours. China is in excess of 30,000 kilowatt hours, which means that if we have to, India has to grow, because energy consumption is also an indicator of development of a particular economy. So as we develop, we will have to find ways of meeting our energy needs. And mobility is a large portion of that. And therefore, the topic, as Vijay Bhai gave to me, is biofuels for Bharat. How are we going to do that? And the other thing is that India, why do we look at biofuels? One is the oil economy, and the other, which is true also in Africa, it's not just true in India or Asia, is also the soil economy. I think countries like us, which are rich in the sun, rich in the soil, rich in water, rich in farmers, rich in young population, we have to start looking at transitioning from the oil to the soil economy. And we have to look at that transition. The world often thinks of, especially if you look at a Eurocentric view of the world looks at a food versus fuel debate, especially when you look at carbon coming from renewable resources. I think it's important for us to think of a food first and a fuel economy. Only if you have food and fuel will you have markets that will encourage productivity. Will you have markets that look at, so I'll give an example. In the past, when in India sugarcane was only used to making sugar, surpluses of that sugar, which was not allowed to go into the European or the American continents, it's still not, that led to a weight on the Indian market, and it would lead to an infamous economic cycle. Moment you created a program of ethanol blending, surpluses on sugar started going into fuel, and now you create a real environment where you want to invest in productivity on the farm, and that productivity on the farm, the surpluses go to meet the energy requirements of the nation. So you need multiple markets to provide that incentive. The government of India has created a tremendous new policy for transforming into green. It is biofuels from ethanol, compressed biogas, or also renewable electricity. In 2018, Bharat had 1.5% blending of ethanol in gasoline. At that time, Prime Minister Narendra Bhai Modi articulated a 20% blend by 2030. Through partnership of the farmer, the industry, the automakers, the policy makers, and the machinery manufacturers came together, and we have reached this target of 20% blend at twice the gasoline consumption by this year, 2025, which is amazing that as a country we have done something so fast. It is my belief that the green soil-based economy can meet 100% of our gasoline requirement. It sounds like a tall order. It was a tall order to think of 20% in 2013, 2017. I seriously believe that if we could think and dream big at that time, it is possible to dream how do we get 100% gasoline substitution by the soil-based carbon economy. If we did 20% today, I have shown numbers which are presented to the Sugar Technologists Association of India. I showed them numbers through a calculation on a spreadsheet, so showing that the sugarcane and the grain and the maize economy could produce another, maybe go from 20 to 25% blend. India has and burns 90 million tons of biomass residue. This is what we read about in the newspapers, putting the smog in Delhi in the wintertime. Sorry. And If that was converted into 2G ethanol, second generation ethanol, that would lead to enough ethanol for another 25% of biofuel in gasoline. The challenges are capital cost and operating cost. We need to get our science to work for it, blue sky thinking. Today, enzymes are made by one company in Scandinavia. We need other companies to make enzymes, figure out ways in which we can reach these targets. And finally, there is a lot of surplus fiber that sugarcane produces. I'm sure Mayurbhai Madhwani knows that he is getting a lot of bagasse, and that bagasse is used to generate electricity. If that electricity, which we count, and we produce efficient co-generating boilers, that surplus electricity could feed another equivalent of 50% of the gasoline consumption today. There is an Indian Sugar Exim Corporation. It is a Section 8 company. It has no shareholders. We have requested the government of India to permit us to create what we call green energy pumps, which will supply electricity, bioethanol, and compressed biogas coming from the sugar mills. We thought we would create a model of a McDonald's kind of system, which is a franchisee model. You create one franchise done by this, and if there are 650 sugar mills in the country, each one creates three such pumps. You show an example of 2,000 such green pumps in the country, showing a new paradigm of business growth. And this is what I think is very possible, along with bioethanol, bioelectricity, and compressed biogas. We create a model to show that not only all the ethanol can go for the gasoline, you can also start substituting diesel with compressed biogas and the electricity with the EVs. You need multiple forms of renewable energy, multiple forms of green carbon coming to power your growth. You don't want EVs coming from coal-based carbon. You want also EVs coming from solar carbon. You want EVs also coming from the green carbon that is generated on the ground. Now, the last point I want to talk about, we all talk about renewables, we talk about biofuels. We look at carbon resources that we see in the coal mines. We see carbon resources in oil. We see carbon resources in gas. We see carbon resources in our trees. What we forget is the carbon which is inside our soil. This is ultimately the soil that is going to be the source of our food, or it is going to be the source of our green carbon for our fuel. This is under the radar. It is under the soil. We don't see it. I think there has to be another great effort to look at how do we keep making sure this soil carbon remains enriched, because without it, we don't have food or we don't have fuel. What we are also trying to do is work with farmers, working with research, working in the field of modern technology, regenerative carbon using old techniques such as Panchagavya, Jivamrut, doing it with drip irrigation farming, doing it with intercropping with legumes, a whole combination, working with academia, trying to make sure that this carbon, so it's a carbon future that we need, carbon that we need to regenerate in the soil, we need to bring out, extract, and transform into a future for our food, fuel, chemicals, and materials. So that's what I think. We can meet all our gasoline in India with regenerative carbon as we go forward and continue to innovate with other molecules in the future. Thank you very much.